Okay, you're on.
All right. Late night from Willowdale. It's August 22nd, 2018. The last video was a bit dated because we had some technology issues, so it was dated by about 4 or 5 days. We were talking about Saudi-Canadian relations and my dislike of Saudi-Israeli or Saudi-Arabia. Saudi-Israeli, I like that because it's basically one country. So lots to talk about tonight. We'll try to do it within 10 minutes. Obviously, the Michael Cohen guilty pleas, the Manafort, that he was found guilty on all these charges. We'll talk about Trump and all that. But let's start off where we pretty much left off the last time with Saudi Arabia. That video was already a bit dated because when we finally got it posted, the Saudis had destroyed a bus in Yemen, killing 40 children. And it got some international press, and some people were outraged. But it really went without passing in the international media that the Saudis basically nailed a bus full of kids, and these kids were, well, essentially murdered by Saudi Arabia. And of course, it went without passing because Saudi Arabia gets a pass on the world stage. Any outrages they do, nobody cares. The Trump administration doesn't care. The rest of the world doesn't care because Saudi seems to have this weird power on the world stage. And yet, let's face it, the world is awash in oil. It's not like we need Saudi oil. Certainly Canada doesn't. I know we get 9% of our oil from Saudi Arabia, but obviously we don't need it. We could figure out other ways to get the oil to the East Coast. But Saudi Arabia is a classic example of what Noam Chomsky so famously said many, many years ago. It all depends on whose ox is being gored. So, Chomsky said, whose ox is being gored? Iran never gets a pass. Everyone hates Iran. Iran never gets a pass. There's nothing Iran can do that will give it any legitimacy on the world stage, even though they got their problems and human rights problems, whatever. But Iran is a relatively democratic country with, obviously not a perfect place, but far better than Saudi Arabia, and actually one of the more democratic countries in the region, including Turkey, a NATO country and a supposedly Western ally. But Turkey gets a pass, Saudi Arabia gets a pass, but Iran doesn't get a pass. So Saudi Arabia can kill and murder as many people as possible, including a bunch of 30, 40 kids on this bus in Yemen, and nobody says anything because they get a pass. Chomsky's right. It's all because they're a big Western ally, a friend of Trump, and they get a pass. The world's not a very nice place. It all depends on whose ox is being gored. So that's a great Chomsky quote, and Saudi Arabia is a classic example of that. Turkey is a whole different story about Turkey-U.S. relations. It's a bit more complex. Erdogan is a thug. But I want to get back to that later when I talk about tribalism. And I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty quick. Let me see. I took some notes. But Afghanistan, while we're talking about as we're moving to Central Asia. Afghanistan is a war without end, okay? As Michael Clare, I could drag the book out. A war without end. You know what? I'm just gonna take this book. You're just gonna have an empty slate here while I grab this book. Michael Clare. I wrote this book. Okay, there's the book. A War Without End, Michael Clare, great U.S. policy scholar from the...
Just hold it up, I guess.
And I used to interview him on our radio show.
There you go.
And everyone quotes the title of his book now. The New York Times Magazine, everybody quotes it. A War Without End. Afghanistan is a war without end. Okay, and Okay. This is a war that's not going anywhere. And I know we all like to do good things in the world, okay? Afghanistan will Afghanistan will not be Canada or the Netherlands anytime soon, okay? It's a very tribal society. It's very misogynistic. It's not. There will be no Hillary Clintons or Kathleen Wynnes in Afghanistan anytime soon. Okay, there's still 14,000 U.S. troops there. There's a smattering of coalition troops there. The Taliban is winning. The Taliban is winning. Okay, the New York Times had a fascinating full-page article in Sunday's New York Times about what are we doing? Like, Afghan security force, Afghan military and police lose 5,000 people a year, 6,000 in a year in Afghanistan. The Taliban is winning despite the overwhelming presence still of the United States and a lot of Western countries. The Taliban is winning. The U.S. still has 14,000 people in Afghanistan, 14,000 soldiers. Doesn't matter, despite the high-tech technology, and everything the U.S. has to muster, the most powerful military in the history of humankind, they're not defeating the Taliban. The Afghan military is useless. I know, 6,000. They're losing 5,000 soldiers a year. The Taliban has a lot of support in the tribal regions of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and they have a lot of support in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is still a very tribal society, and it's a very conservative society, and you're not going to win this war, okay? We know from Vietnam and from other wars that indigenous insurgents will win. We know the Viet Cong beat this massive U.S. military presence, okay? The threat of nuclear, Richard Nixon threatened to use nuclear weapons in Vietnam. And the Viet Cong won against the South Vietnamese army and thousands upon thousands of U.S. troops. And the Viet Cong won in the end. Okay, in 1975, the Americans finally had to flee Vietnam. So the insurgents in the end will win. The Taliban will win. The only way to... I'm sorry, Afghanistan, as I said, will not be Canada. It will not be Holland. We're not going to change that society. It's tribalistic. It's not... I wouldn't want to live there. As I said, Kathleen Wynne and Hillary Clinton would not be elected in Afghanistan, okay? So it's time to move on, okay? Let the Afghans figure out their own problems. Yes, I mean, you're not going to have this pluralistic sort of liberal Western democracy. I'm sorry, tribalism will win in Afghanistan. It's time to leave, you know? And let the Afghans figure it out. Let the Indians and the Pakistanis and the Iranians figure out their regional issues. It's time for Americans to leave. It's time for Western powers to leave. The great game has been going on long enough, you know, since the 18th, 19th century when the Brits and the Russians fought it out in Afghanistan. Nobody won. The Russians were chased out of Afghanistan in the 1980s. And since 2001, the Americans have put so much blood and treasure in that place. 158 Canadians died in Afghanistan. Like, no, it's time to leave. This is a war without end. So I would just say, you know, if Trump really wanted to do something smart, leave. Leave Afghanistan. Let them figure it out. There's a new prime minister in Pakistan, Imran Khan. Who knows what his dealie is, but let him figure it out. You know, like, let the regional powers figure it out. Iran, this is where not having relations with Iran is a bad thing. Because, you know, Iran could probably help a lot in Afghanistan. And the Russians could probably help too. You know, you need to have a regional summit on Afghanistan. But obviously negotiated settlement with the Taliban is the only way to go in Afghanistan. And I know there are talks coming up in Moscow and everything, so maybe that's a good thing. But if Trump really wanted to do something smart on the foreign policy stage, he would say, okay, let's get a negotiated settlement with the Taliban. It ain't going to be perfect. Just like the settlement in Vietnam was not perfect, and the Americans had to, they had to flee, Saigon in 1975, April 75. Yeah, there's no perfect solution to Afghanistan. And a lot of people in Afghanistan support the Taliban. They already occupy 20% of the territory. And like I said, 5,000, 6,000 Afghani troops, police are being killed every year by the Taliban. And still, tons of Americans are being killed every year in Afghanistan. So maybe it's time to leave, Tribalism is you can't defeat it. And a lot of Afghans support the Taliban. They're very conservative culture, and unfortunately, we're not going to be putting liberal sort of democracies all around the world. It doesn't work. Tribalism exists in the Congo, in Africa, it exists in Afghanistan, it exists in so many parts of the world, and sometimes you just can't defeat it. And when I'm talking about tribalism, I'm talking also about so-called Western democracies. Tribalism has come up in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Hungary, in Poland, all over Western Europe, in Britain, in France, in the Netherlands. Tribalism is about people sticking to a shtick, In terms of Western Europe and in the United States, and this is where it takes me back to Trump. It's about white nationalism. It's about anti-immigration. It's about we have to stick to our cultures, our 300-400-year-old cultures, 500-year-old, whatever. We don't like immigrants. And that's where tribalism is not only existed in Afghanistan, which goes back, millennia. It's existed in Eastern and Western Europe. It's existed in the United States. It's existent in many countries. It's the one country that's resisted tribalism is Canada, and this has been noted in many articles in the world. Canada has resisted this sort of anti-immigrant populism. And forget Doug Ford, and yeah, he's a populist, but he didn't get elected on anti-immigrant populism.
He has a Christian kind of thingy going on.
He's got his own little thingy, but it wasn't really about a lot of his coalition were immigrants. And Canada doesn't work. And I know the federal conservatives are trying to bring that up again, about limiting immigration. It's not going to work in Canada, I don't think, this sort of anti-immigrant
Well, not Andrew Scheer.
Yeah,
Maxime Bernier.
Yeah,
right?
some of Andrew Scheer's acolytes or people in the party. It's not going to work. If the conservatives actually think they're getting to power by going against brown and black people, and that's not going to work. Not in a country where the two major cities in Canada, Vancouver and Toronto, are where visible minorities are in the majority. And it's not going to work in this country. Yes, there's racism in this country. Of course there is. Canada's not a perfect place. But populism is one of the few Canada's one of the few countries in the world that has resisted this anti-immigrant populism. And there's lots of reasons for it. Better integration, better socioeconomic. And I don't want to dwell on this, but tribalism does exist, not just in Afghanistan or in Central Africa, or it exists in the Western world. We've seen it in Poland, Hungary, and certainly in the United States.
It's probably not witchcraft, but it's tribalism.
Yeah, exactly. It's just people clinging to their beliefs and their culture and the color of their skin and their language, and that's a thing we need to combat globally. Like we live in a global society anyways, everyone knows what I'm talking about. Like, this is not a healthy thing. Tribalism is not a healthy thing. So whether it exists in Central Asia, Afghanistan, or in Western Europe, or Eastern Europe, or in the United States, it's not a good thing. So yes, Trump is let's bring it back to Trump. So the headline, it's all around the world today, is, there you go. Pleading guilty, Cohen implicates the president. And of course, in the sub-headline is Manafort gets convicted on 8 counts. All the, New York Times had a great editorial today. I'm being casual in this video. It's going to go on for a bit, but all the president's crooks. You know, Donald Trump. Oh yeah, do I have my eyes aren't too good, but yeah, I think the New York Times editorial said it all. Donald Trump. Let me read the first paragraph of this editorial, because that says it all. From the start of the Russia investigation, President Trump has been working to discredit the work and integrity of the special counsel Robert Mueller, who is a Republican, by the way, praising men who are blatant grifters, cons, and crooks. And of course, Trump has said he has done nothing wrong, and reminding us that he hires the best people. Trump. This describes Trump: a grifter, a con, and a crook. Okay? Trump is a crook par none, okay? He conned the American people into voting for him. And going back to he used tribal politics, okay? Like, most Americans knew he was a crook, okay? Like, they did. They got it. They didn't care because Trump appealed to white nationalism, you know, the whole anti-immigrant thing, and that it appealed to a lot of white nationalists in coal country, saying your jobs are going to come back, we'll bring back your jobs. Of course, it's a total lie because they're not coming back. And he appealed to a lot of ignorance and stupidity.
Well, look at somebody like Richard Spencer, right? That kind of snowballed. And it was kind of due to the Trump presidency, but I mean, I don't think indicting Trump is going to stop somebody like Richard Spencer. I mean,
no, Trump has his core support, okay, of racists and lowlifes, and Hillary was right. Basket of deplorables. I'm sorry, if you really thought that Trump was going to bring you the New Jerusalem, you're pretty stupid, and he hasn't. His tariffs and are hurting a lot of people supported him, and talking about bringing back jobs to industrial America will never come back. Yes, I'm sorry. Like, he conned the American people, conned stupid people, and there's nothing wrong for calling that out for what is. He conned a lot of stupid people, and some of these people will continue, like the rally in West Virginia last night. They will support him no matter what. It's true. Trump could shoot a gun in Fifth Avenue, and they'll continue to support him. It doesn't matter what Trump does. Like, he has a cult. He has a cult around him, and once you have a cult, there's nothing you can do wrong. His supporters don't give a damn about these indictments and plea bargains, and they just love the guy because he's a racist, like a lot of his supporters are. He'll continue to rail against immigration, and it goes on and on and on. And this is what happens in politics when you get a cult, like when people just lose their sense of reality. And yeah, a lot of Trump supporters are poor, they're ignorant, and they're not getting their jobs back. Automation and robots have taken a lot of these jobs away anyways. It's easy to blame immigrants, which he did, and that's how he got elected. And of course, there's a lot of misogyny in American political life, as there is in the rest of the world. Putin, a lot of people on the left say, "Oh, it's all fake news," and Putin's the greatest guy since since Adolf Hitler. A lot of people on the left just think Putin's the greatest guy, right? Putin's a thug and a murderer. As a lot of these Erdogan and Duarte, and who all like Trump, all depend on tribalism and whip up nationalist fervor. Putin said in Helsinki, and that's as important. He said it all. He said, "We didn't like Hillary Clinton. We wanted Trump to win, and they did everything in their power to help that happen." Putin said it all in Helsinki. We did not want Hillary Clinton to win. We wanted Trump to win. And they did. They followed through. They did everything in their power. Russia, you got to understand misogyny in global life, and including American politics. Russia is a very machoistic society. Look at, Putin. He's taking his shirt off all the time, or whatever. How many women are in the leadership of Russian political life? None. They did a lot. It wasn't just Hillary Clinton's politics and the fact that she supported, democracy in Russia. It was that she was a woman, and the last thing Russian politicians wanted, or Russian life wanted, was a woman to be the president of the United States. They have problems enough with Angela Merkel, who's one of the most powerful people in the world, and she happens to be a woman, and she also happens to speak Russian, because she grew up in East Germany. Putin didn't want another Angela Merkel in a position of power, the most powerful position. So there was an animus towards having Hillary Clinton just because she was a woman. And of course, I'm rambling on in this video, but there's a lot to say. I mean, a lot of American women stayed home because they didn't like Hillary Clinton. And a lot of people on the left stayed home because Bernie Sanders, didn't win, and they stayed home. And there was an animus towards Hillary Clinton that's still unnerving and unfathomable, because the Clintons were kind of sleazy, but nothing compared to Trump, right? Like, nothing compared to Trump. Trump screwed so many people over in his, 50 years in life. He's 70, whatever, but, in his adult life, he screwed so many people over. He hurt so many people, and he was as sleazy as he had so many affairs with so many women, as we know. He made Bill Clinton look like a virgin, and he got elected president because he appealed to people's stupidities, their hatreds, their racism, and Hillary Clinton did not run a good campaign. And she was already reviled by it for bizarrely and not rationally, but reviled by a lot of Americans. So that's how it all happened. It's a weird. She only lost by 70,000 votes, by the way. She won the popular vote, and she only lost by 70,000 votes in the Electoral College. So, yeah, but it does come down to tribalism and appealing to people's worst instincts, their hatreds of immigrants, their hatred of change, their hatred of technology, and so it's tribalism in Afghanistan. It's tribalism in Western countries, and I'm trying to bring it all together from Afghanistan to the United States and what's happening in Western Europe and the United States. And it does come down to ignorance. And we're not going to change Afghanistan. They'll change on their own eventually if the world survives, which is due to climate change, and given the summer that we've had, who knows?
Oh, awful.
Yeah, but they'll let the regional powers in Asia deal with Afghanistan. U.S. should leave. Western countries should leave. Iraq and Syria and all that. At some point you got to let people just sort it out for themselves, and there was a good quote here at the end of this New York Times editorial, but I think I've said enough, and I've gone on a lot longer than I wanted to say. But Trump is an unsavory character. He got elected president because he appealed to people's worst instincts. Hillary ran a bad campaign. There's also a lot of hatred of women, and there's a lot of ignorance out there. And if you think that Clintons Bill Clinton got impeached because he had an unsavory affair with an intern who was legal, 21, 22, whatever, and he got impeached for that. Yes, he was a bit of a sleazebag, no question. But compared to Trump, he was a fucking angel, and the Whitewater thing went on and turned into the whole Lewinsky thing, and impeachment. The U.S. Constitution is an interesting thing. They say they can't indict a sitting president. But let me look. I need to say this to people because people who are watching this need to know. You can actually, because New York Times had a task. I need to read you this, okay? This video's gone long enough, so anyone who's watching it is still watching it. But the closest the Constitution has to come to addressing the issue is in this passage. This is about indicting a sitting president for crimes. And Cohen basically spilled the beans. Trump told Cohen to pay off Stormy Daniels and McDougal, right? I forget the other woman involved.
Right.
To stop him,
The
Playboy playmate, stop him from being embarrassing in the last month of the presidential election, and that's a campaign violation. So yes. So can he be indicted? He's definitely under Nixon. Nixon was a unindicted co-conspirator, and everyone's saying Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator. The closest the Constitution has to come to addressing the issue is this passage from Article 1, Section 3. This is the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 3. It's important you people read this. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to the removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to the law. This much seems, and of course they go on, this much seems clear. The president and other federal officials may be prosecuted after they leave office. And of course this goes on in the New York Times. However, whether the Constitution allows indictment of a sitting president is debatable. Brett Kavanaugh, who's Trump's Supreme Court nominee, served on the staff. Ken Starr, the independent counsel who investigated President Clinton, is now Mr. Trump's Supreme Court nominee. He wrote in a 1998 Law Review article when he was on the U.S. Court of Appeals, the District of Columbia. He concluded that impeachment, not prosecution, was the right way to address a sitting president's crime. The bottom line is, the U.S. Constitution says quite clearly they're not decided on whether you can indict a sitting president. There's no law there. It's so. We'll see what happens. Trump is definitely worthy of indictment, and I've rambled on about this, but this is, there's a lot of hypocrisy. Trump gets away with stuff that no President Clinton didn't get away with, that no other. I mean, the Iran-Contra thing was all. Don't get me wrong, Watergate went on for a number of years, and the Iran-Contra went on for a number of years. So the Mueller investigation goes on for a couple of years. It's no big deal. I can't believe how I've rambled on about this. There's so much to talk about. But I think to wind it all up, and this is a long video. So
it's okay. It'll upload real fast.
Yeah. This is about tribalism.
I have Rogers again.
This is about tribalism. Okay? Canada is a country that is one of the few, and many have noted that Canada's one of the few countries that escaped this kind of nutty tribalism and populism because its economic conditions are pretty good. It's a probably socially equitable country. Lots of problems. We all get that. Trump wanted a tribal program, white nationalism, hatred of immigrants. Appealing to people's dark side. It's happened in Europe. We see it. Brexit was part of this in Britain. Russia, Putin plays to this nationalist card. Erdogan certainly does, especially in this dispute with the U.S., which is a really interesting dispute. Putin is playing. Erdogan's playing to it. His cards are limited because he needs the United States. But they play to this, and Xi in China plays to this, and so tribalism, it's about ignorance and stupidity and this false nationalism, and in the end, it doesn't get you anywhere. Tariffs doesn't get you anywhere. It hurts. Trump's tariffs are hurting his base. Tribalism is about ignorance, and It happens in Afghanistan. It happens in the Congo and parts of Africa, and it certainly happens in. So I'm just trying to tell you, Trump will not be impeached. There's a tribal community in the United States, and the Republican Party has been bought off by the Trump organization. I don't see anything bad happening to Trump despite all this stuff. He has a tribal core following. And we'll see what happens in the midterms. And yet, I could see Trump getting reelected, actually. I just think there's this, once a cult develops around you, we see it in Turkey, we see it other places. Yeah, I don't, it's sad. It's based on ignorance, but once it happens, people don't look at reality, they don't look at the facts, they just love their leader. And Trump has created this, and we'll see what happens. It might not work in the United States. We'll see. All the people think the headlines in today's papers are the beginning and the end of Trump. I don't see it. Americans knew what they got when they elected this guy. He's a crook, a con. He should have been in prison a long time ago, but they knew what they got and they elected him. And they could have had
I agree.
They could have had a relatively intelligent president, Hillary Clinton. Yes, not, obviously a bit sleazy, but come on, really. Compared to Trump? So, yeah, and of course Putin wanted Trump in power. He admitted it. Do you want an intelligent woman like Hillary Clinton? Do you want a woman in power? No, you want Trump, who's manipulable, who's a strong man, just like Trump, plays to tribalism, just like Putin, Erdogan, Duarte, the rest of all these thugs that he loves. And I've rambled on a long time, and I'm sorry. There's so much to talk about, but it does come, all of this does come down to ignorance and facts. And unfortunately, ignorance is winning the day in a lot of places on planet Earth. I think Canada's still immune, and I think Doug Ford's Ontario is still somewhat immune. I don't think Doug Ford, Doug Ford should
But there's a conservative wave in Canada.
There's a conservative wave, and the federal conservatives are trying to play this anti-immigrant thing. It's not going to work. Doug Ford did not play the anti-immigrant thing in Ontario because his coalition includes a lot of immigrants. He played the anti-Kathleen Wynne stuff, which is, I still think, it's not rational, and why she lost is not rational, and he's done some pretty stupid stuff. We've already talked about it. But I see Doug Ford, or he's already on the same sex ed thing, or the sex ed curriculum. He's already malleable on certain things. Doug Ford and Donald Trump are different. So in Canada, you can't compare Canadian politics to the U.S. or other parts of the world. Canada's still kind of a beacon of hope. And I'm cynical, believe me, but Canada's still a beacon of hope. We didn't go through the economic turmoil after 2008. Populism never really rose in Canada as it did in Western Europe and the United